Just got my hands on something that will make your blood boil. Secret audio recordings of Keir Starmer leaked by a reporter who has finally had enough of the lies. These tapes expose Starmer privately mocking pensioners who can't afford heating this winter. Yes, the same man responsible for cutting their winter fuel payments is laughing about it behind closed doors. Wait until you hear what he really thinks about the British public. Ever wondered what happens when a reporter becomes so disillusioned with politics that they risk everything to expose the truth? Well, that's exactly what happened inside Starmer's Labour Party, and the results are nothing short of shocking. My source for today's bombshell revelations is a political reporter who initially believed in Labour's message but became disillusioned by what they witnessed. They gained access to private meetings where the real Keir Starmer emerged, a figure vastly different from his carefully crafted public persona. In these closed-door sessions, our source documented staggering contradictions between his public promises and private statements. At first, the reporter dismissed these discrepancies as standard political maneuvering, but soon the gap between Starmer's two faces became impossible to ignore, compelling them to start recording these meetings. I couldn't reconcile what I was hearing in these private discussions with what was being told to the public, the reporter explained. There was a moral obligation to document this. The real turning point came during a particularly disturbing incident. Our source witnessed Starmer openly mocking elderly voters concerned about heating their homes this winter. The same man who publicly claims to care about vulnerable people was laughing about their struggles behind closed doors. And it wasn't an isolated incident, this behavior was a pattern. During private strategy meetings, Starmer and his team coldly calculated which vulnerable groups they could politically afford to harm, analyzing who had the least power to fight back. The contrast with his compassionate public image was jarring. Our source wasn't alone in their discomfort. They observed other staffers exchanging worried glances during these meetings, clearly troubled by the disconnect between Starmer's public promises and private plans. The tension in the room was palpable whenever cynical strategies were discussed. There were definitely others who felt the same way I did, the reporter revealed. The atmosphere in some of these meetings was tense. You could tell people were conflicted about what was being discussed. The decision to leak these recordings wasn't made impulsively. Our source wrestled with the professional and ethical implications for weeks, weighing the risk of career destruction and potential legal consequences against the need for the public to know the truth. They understood that this choice would likely end their career in political journalism. Starmer's appearance on This Morning became the catalyst. While viewers saw an awkward interview where he stumbled over tax increase questions, our whistleblower saw something far more sinister: profound hypocrisy. Just days earlier, in a private meeting, Starmer had confidently outlined these same tax plans, brushing aside concerns with an arrogance entirely absent from his television appearance. One former Labour supporter summed up the widespread frustration. Starmer's inability to articulate a clear vision for the party has left many feeling disillusioned. His recent interview only reinforced the belief that he is out of touch with the electorate's needs. That interview finally pushed our reporter to action. The gap between the stammering, uncertain Starmer on television and the calculated, dismissive figure in private meetings had become too vast to ignore. The public deserved the truth about the man leading the country, how he mocked elderly voters worried about heating bills while cutting their winter fuel payments, dismissed legitimate concerns behind closed doors, and maintained completely different personas in public and private settings. The recordings our whistleblower leaked expose something truly stomach-turning about Starmer's attitude toward the elderly. While pensioners across Britain worry about freezing in their homes, behind closed doors, Starmer was caught on tape actually laughing about their predicament, calling him politically expendable in a private meeting. The audio captures a strategy session where Starmer and his inner circle discuss winter fuel payment cuts with a casual tone that betrays their public statements. Listen closely, and you'll hear the moment Starmer refers to 1.5 million vulnerable elderly citizens as politically expendable, suggesting they're unlikely to protest in the streets. His words hang in the air like ice crystals, cold and sharp. These are people who built our country, worked their entire lives, and now face impossible choices between warmth and food, yet Starmer dismisses them simply because they won't create political headaches. What makes this recording particularly chilling is when someone mentions elderly people having to choose between heating and eating. You can hear Starmer laughing. Not nervously, not uncomfortably, but as if he were watching a slow-motion tragedy without feeling its weight. It's the laugh of someone calculating human suffering in purely political terms. This audio completely shatters the image Starmer cultivates in Parliament. While publicly speaking of difficult but necessary decisions with practiced concern, privately he calculates exactly how many vulnerable elderly people he can harm without facing consequences. The recording reveals that Starmer knew precisely how many pensioners would suffer. Around 1.5 million elderly Brits live in fuel poverty, unable to keep their homes adequately warm. This isn't just a minor statistic, it's a massive humanitarian issue affecting real people. While Starmer claims something different in Parliament, our reporter noted mixed reactions during this meeting. Some advisers looked visibly uncomfortable, exchanging worried glances as their boss casually dismissed the well-being of pensioners. Others joined in the mockery, treating real suffering like a political game. The recording also provides remarkable insight into how these cuts connect to Rachel Reeves's budget planning. You can hear discussions about public messaging, with Starmer directing his team to stick to the difficult but necessary line, knowing full well that the real motivation was entirely different. Most shocking of all, Starmer admits these winter fuel payment cuts were never actually about saving money. All those pensioners shivering in their homes this winter, all those elderly people choosing between heating and eating, they're not victims of tough economic choices. They're guinea pigs in a political experiment. In the leaked audio, Starmer clearly states that these cuts are about testing how far austerity measures can be pushed onto vulnerable groups before triggering political backlash. It's not about balancing the books, it's about determining how much they can get away with. Pensioner advocacy groups raising alarms about these cuts were right all along. When they warned that these measures disproportionately affect the most vulnerable in society, they weren't exaggerating. What they didn't know was that this wasn't an unfortunate side effect, it was the entire point. The British public isn't just sitting back and accepting Starmer's treatment of vulnerable citizens. They're delivering their verdict at ballot boxes nationwide. While the mainstream media may try to downplay it, the numbers don't lie. Labour councils that have stood firm for decades are collapsing like dominoes, marking one of the fastest declines in political goodwill in recent memory. Labour strongholds where they've dominated local politics for generations are suddenly rejecting them outright. These aren't small losses, they're complete reversals, leaving veteran political analysts stunned. The message from voters is crystal clear. Campaign reports show that Labour candidates are hearing the same thing at doorsteps everywhere: concerns about Starmer's dishonesty. Voters aren't bringing up policy disagreements or complex issues. They're directly questioning Starmer's integrity, specifically pointing out how he contradicts himself between public statements and private actions. This isn't some fringe opinion, it's becoming the dominant view among everyday voters who previously supported Labour without hesitation.